Hello everyone. So today we are going to begin a series of lessons that are going to involve frame-by-frame animation. So let's go ahead and go to Premiere and let's start a new project. And we're going to call this one, let's bring it to the center here, Bouncing Ball 1. And I'll press OK. So let's talk about frame rate. Most of the video footage that we have been using has been filmed at either 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second, depending on the settings that were put into the camera when you were using them. A lot of the videos that you find online, like on Pixabay or things like that, generally are at a higher frame rate so that you can adjust that if you want to use those for dramatic effect. Most animation is done around 24 frames a second. 24 frames a second means that every second that goes by, a new still image goes, and that's how fast it can be done. Now, with computer animation, I think a lot of that stuff is done at 60 frames a second, and a lot of video games are done at 60 frames a second. Some are even going up to 120 frames a second. But the faster it goes, sometimes what you end up getting is you sort of lose a few things, like you lose motion blur, and you get that extra clean look that sometimes people they call it the soap opera effect. When you play movies at like 60 frames a second or 48 frames a second, things that were like, for instance, I want to say The Hobbit was released with 48 frames per second theatrical release, and everyone said it looked really jarring and stuff. So generally speaking, we want to use our frame-by-frame animation at around 24 frames a second. If you do 12 frames a second, that could even be a little jerkier, but a little less work. But in this case, we're going to be using this at 24 frames a second. So let's go over here to our window here. So I'm under the editing window, and if you can't see what I see, you can just reset to the saved layout by hitting this little hamburger menu down here. And let's find this little button down here that says New Item, and let's say have a new color matte. The color matte in this case is going to be set to be 1920 by 1080, and the time base is going to be set to 23.976 frames per second. That is generally the accepted version of 24 frames a second, even though it's not quite 24 frames a second. They leave that last little bit off for reasons unknown, I think, to anyone, except for the fact that it's just an industry standard. You have the option of doing 24, but just for the sake of these purposes, let's just do 23.976. Okay, with that done, choose your color for whatever background you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to avoid this bright fire engine red color because that's really, gross and stuff. But let's just choose a color. I'm going to choose a sort of a dark, maybe grayish blue color as my color matte, and I'm going to name this Bouncing Ball 1, and you'll see why I name it that in a second. And I'll just drag this in. Now, if you go to your animation folder here, you should see this little animation Keyframes Gif. This was actually created by someone from a website that I don't believe is up anymore. It was created several years ago, called angryanimator.com. I don't recommend you go there. I don't know what you're going to find there. But basically what this shows is that whenever you're doing a frame-by-frame animation, essentially what you're doing is animating not just where it's going to be, but how it's going to look when it's going to be there. So in this case, the ball sort of travels in this way, and it begins to elongate as it makes its way down, and these little keyframes will allow you to kind of have little tweening frames in between. So in this case, we're not going to be, this is not going to be every single frame. We're going to make this maybe every second frame or even every third frame to have it bounce sort of a little rate here, and we can actually see it transform. In this case, it'll transform from one place to the other, and we'll have to figure out what our animation is going to be. Now, there's no real easy way to draw shapes such as a circle in Adobe Premiere. So I also included this little ball icon here, this little picture here. It's totally white. So once you bring it in, it's going to be white. It's going to be white against the your shall we say against your paper here. So it's going to be hard for you to see it. So I recommend that you find this effect, go to Effects, and just search for Paint Bucket. And just find Generate Paint Bucket here, drag that in. It's going to color it red. Now once again, I don't recommend you use that red color. So under Effect Controls, you can go down here to your Paint Bucket, and you can find your fill and maybe change it to something a little bit more pleasing to the eye. In this case, maybe choose something that's going to be kind of opposite on the color spectrum of your background. In this case, maybe a pale orange might stand out well. Maybe a little paler. I'll just choose down here, maybe like so, a little bit brighter. This is actually kind of nice. right? So if I were to like make this invisible here, you can kind of see that stands out really nicely, right? Orange, opposite than the color wheel. I'm not satisfied. There we go. That's nice. Okay, cool. All right, so with that done, I'm going to get in a little bit closer to this, and I'm going to zoom in some. I'm going to zoom in to say under here where it says fit, maybe 150%. And if you click up here, I want to say if you hold down the, no, okay, never mind. You should be able to navigate by using the scroll bars on the sides to find your ball here. So let's navigate up. Here's this. And let's see if we can make this as best we can to fit inside constraints there. Okay, so before we get started, let's set a couple things up. We want to set up some keyframes for both the position, so click on position, and we also want to set them for the scale as well. Now in this case, we're going to have the ball sort of elongate, so we want to make sure that we don't have it set to have a uniform scale. So I want to have both the scale height and the scale width. I'm going to have those both be set, and I'm also going to have an anchor point for its rotation as well, because it's going to be swiveling as it goes down. So it's really important that we pay attention to all those things. So our anchor point's right in the center here, and so we already have our first keyframe, and I'll move this back a little bit so I can see this a bit better. And let's move forward. I'm going to move forward. I'll move forward, say 3 keyframes. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's just move this down a bit here, like so. Now once again, 1, 2, 3, and I'll move this down a little bit further. So you can see as it starts to fall, we start to pick up speed until we reach our terminal velocity. You know, is it 8 point something feet per second per second? Okay, there's that. And once again, I'll move forward 3 keyframes here. 1, 2, 3. And I'll drag this down some. Now notice here, it's starting to elongate. It's hard to see. It's a very slight. But I'm going to do this number here. I'm going to rotate this slightly this way. See if I can't find my little rotation keyframe. Here we go. Here it is down here at the bottom. I'm going to rotate it slightly this way. And I'm just going to stretch it out just a bit. Just a little bit there. Okay, so that's good. So it's just slightly more long than it was before. Okay, so once again, 1, 2, 3. And I'll drag this down. Maybe drag this over here. First off, let's see if we can't drag this over here towards the shape there. Drag this down over here, and maybe even rotate it a little bit further to where it's pointing a little more down. And let's elongate it slightly again. Here we go. Have it pointing down. That's good. And maybe even we could thin it up some too, just a slight pinching on the inside, as it were. All right, there's that. And then we'll pull it down to the next keyframe here. Oops, undo. All right, so let's just once again, 1, 2, 3. So we'll go forward 3 keyframes, 3 frames, and we'll drag this down here. Once again, we're going to have to affect all these things. We're going to rotate it slightly to where it's pointing. Oh, undo that. Rotate it again to where it's pointing slightly. And then thin it up. And then stretch it out. What do you think of it slightly here? Okay, that's really good. And then we'll 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to pull it down here, and let's see if we can't get it towards it's straight up and down. In this case, we're going to have to go over our rotation and pull it back to, I want to say 0. Right, there's 0, so it's hit there, and it's just going to oblate, and it's going to squish. So we're elongating it horizontally this time. Pull it down some. And let's see if we can't constrain it so it's sort of squished down there. All right, oops, a little bit here. Okay, cool. All right, so let's take a look-see. I'm going to move this back out to fit, and I'm going to come back here, and I'll just play this here. All right, cool. So that looks good so far. I'm going to come back to this last keyframe by hitting this little triangle right here. And once again, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to speed this up. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to think about the path that it's taking, the trajectory it's taking here. So for instance, it's going to go up this way, and it can either rotate all the way around, or it can sort of like hang in the air and then just sort of point in that direction. So it could, so for instance, if this is the bottom edge, perhaps the bottom edge is like pointed straight down, then it's pointed a little bit toward the sort of southwestern side, and then the bottom edge points towards the north southeastern side. Or what you can do is you can have it sort of flip around over. The direction's not necessarily going to be visible because there's no sort of variation to the design here, but you will see. So I'm going to speed this up, and you just follow along, and essentially you're just going to advance forward 3 frames, and every time you advance, you then sort of apply the transformations to have it fit these keyframes here to fit the sort of bouncing ball, the natural progression of the bouncing ball here. Okay, so let's pause here for just 1 second. The last 2 keyframes are somewhat confusing because they're one on top of the other. The second to last keyframe here is squished down because it's hitting the ground here, so it should be kind of oblate and flattened, right? So we hit that there. We put that right there. And then we go forward 3 keyframes, and then we pull it back to normal, pull it up like this, and then we pull it back down. So I want to say whatever the original, I want to say it was like 9.6 or something like that. Yeah, 9.7, 9.8. Right, just put it right there. We shouldn't really move it too much. Okay, so let's kind of go back and forth between these keyframes here. Boop, boop. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to make this invisible, this little animation GIF here, and I'm going to come back out to fit, and let's see what this looks like here. Okay, so there's a little bit of a mistake here. At some point, I missed a keyframe, I want to say. Right about there, I want to say. Let's look here. Let's go back and forth here. So this one goes here, and then goes there, and then there. I don't think I spaced those out quite right. Okay, I want to see it. If I were to get in close here, I can probably see where I didn't space them out right. Right here, I can see I didn't space them out right. So I can go through here, and what I can do from here, let's think here. Let's go to this one, and then we'll just advance forward here. 1, 2, right, yeah, I didn't quite space those out the same way as I did everything else. 1, 2, okay, right, I didn't, so I kind of, I was a little trigger happy here, so let me just pull this out, and what I'll do is I'll see if I can move these forward slightly. Let me just pull this over a little this way, and I'll just drag select all these keyframes, and I can just sort of move them over one. Let's actually just advance forward once. I'll just move all these to match that. And the same thing here. I'll go to the next keyframe and I'll just advance forward 1 and drag all these in. Right there. Is this right? This is 1, 2, 3. Good. 1, 2, 3. Cool. Well, let's see if we can't watch this one now. Right. There you go. That looks all right. I want to say there might be a couple other places here or there where they weren't quite spaced out right, or at least they weren't spaced out evenly. So I was trying to like hit 3 each time. So let's think here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yep, everything's even. I think sometimes you just get a little bit of a difference in the shapes here. Maybe even like I want to say it's right about here that kind of gets me a little bit off. That's right there. Yeah. I wonder. Well, okay, so as you can see, we have this little bounce here. Now, the last little thing I want to do is just to take this little keyframe thing here, and I'm actually going to put a little paint bucket effect on this one as well. So let me just put a paint bucket effect on this guy. And then what I'll do, I'll change his, tolerance, 100%. There we go. And what I'll do with this guy is I'll actually just shrink this guy down and pull him down to the bottom here. Oops. Just drag this guy down to the bottom. About here, so it'll be just fine. All right, and I'll just make it a different color. Say, for instance, like a grayish black color. That's good. Okay, cool. Now we have this little surface that it's bouncing on. Boing, 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 boing. Cool. Right. That's it. Okay. Last thing I want you to do is I want you to put your name on this. So I'm gonna go over here to the top, and I'll just get my text tool, and I'll just click. I'll just put Labello. Change the font, something different. Any second now, it'll pop up, or it'll crash. Here we go. Bello. So change the font to something over here in your select the text, and then change the font. There we go. Cool. All right. So neat. So there we go. There is our first little foray into frame-by-frame animation. Very cool. Well, I can't wait to see you guys produce, and see you in class.